Welcome back to Askewed Reviews. And since Saturday Night Live recently did their 50th anniversary, I am slowly but surely going through all of the SNL related films. So today's movie is the 1993 film Coneheads. Here is your trivia question for today. What does Beldar mistake for chewing gum? The answer will be at the end of this episode. So, in the film Coneheads, we meet some aliens from the planet Remulac. They have come to Earth to take it over. Unfortunately, their space shuttle crashes. So, until someone else can stop by and pick them up, they will have to live life as humans, where they will consume mass quantities of food, join the workforce, befriend their neighbors, and eventually they even end up having a child of their own. Now, unfortunately for the Coneheads, it does appear that the government might be onto them. So, will they manage to keep the humans off their trail, or will someone from their home planet finally remember to pick them up? So, this movie was directed by Steve Barron. Now, apparently, Dan Aykroyd did ask if he could direct, but unfortunately, due to his only directorial film being Nothing But Trouble, and that one being a huge flop, they said no. Now, Barron, on the other hand, had recently come off the hugely successful Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Now, this film is, of course, based off of the Saturday Night Live skit that also involves the alien lifeforms known as the Coneheads. In those skits, you did have Dan Aykroyd as Beldar, Jane Curtin as Premat, but as Connie, you actually had Lorraine Newman. When making the film, they of course felt that Lorraine Newman was too old to play a teenager, so they brought in the actress Michelle Burke to play Connie. Lorraine Newman did, however, get a small cameo as the character of Larda. Now, the three actors from the original skits were not the only SNL alumni that showed up in this film. You also had brief appearances by Garrett Morris, John Lovitz, and Jan Hooks. There was also plenty of appearances by current SNL cast members, including Chris Farley as the character of Ronnie, which was actually a character from the first Conehead sketch, played by Bill Murray. You also have David Spade as Eli Turnbull, who in this film is an INS agent, but also did appear in the original sketches, but as an IRS agent played by Steve Martin. Now, other current cast members that were not playing characters from sketches were Adam Sandler, Phil Hartman, Julia Sweeney, Tim Meadows, and Kevin Nealon. There was even one actor in this film that would go on to become a cast member of Saturday Night Live, and that was Michael McKean. There were also plenty of non Saturday Night Live cameos, including Dave Thomas. There were two from Seinfeld, including Michael Richards and Jason Alexander. Tom Arnold shows up briefly, and there were even two comedians with Sinbad and Eddie Griffin. Also, as Connie's two friends, you have Parker Posey and in her feature film debut, Joey Lauren Adams. Two other actors that had their feature film debut in this movie are Drew Carey and Ellen DeGeneres. There were even four actors that had their cameos cut from the film, and this was Brian Doyle Murray, Conan O'Brien, Colleen Camp, and Ellen Cleghorn. Playing Connie at age 3 was Dan Aykroyd's daughter, Danielle Aykroyd. Also appearing briefly as the High Master Mentat was Aykroyd's brother, Peter. The makeup for each of the Conehead characters took about 2 hours to apply. Now, this is never mentioned in the film, and I don't know if it's ever mentioned on the television series sketches, but apparently Connie's full name is Constellation. Did you ever happen to notice in the film there's a part where Dan Aykroyd's Beldar is just covered in blue slime? The reason for this is in the original version of the film, when he narfles the Garthok, he doesn't just strangle it, he beheads the creature and gets covered in its blue blood. Now, to try and keep it under a certain rating, they cut that out, but for some reason decided not to re-record that last sequence where he is covered in the blue. Here's something that I just found randomly interesting. There are three actors in this film, Michael McKean, Michael Richards, and Adam Sandler, that all appear in another film called Airheads, which released the exact same year as Coneheads. Did you happen to know that Dan Aykroyd and Michael McKean are two people in a very special group? As of the recording of this video, they are currently the only two people in history that are able to say that they were a cast member, a host, and a musical guest of Saturday Night Live. I am a little surprised that even though Adam Sandler sung many times on SNL, that he was never a musical guest. Two of this film's writers were Bonnie and Terry Turner, who did a lot of writing for SNL and even some of the movies related to it. Something you may not have known is that they also went on to create the television series Third Rock from the Sun. This was a television series about a bunch of aliens trying to live amongst humans. Sound a bit familiar? And if you didn't know, appearing on this show were both Jane Curtin and Jan Hooks, who also, of course, appeared in this film. If it weren't for the massive success of Wayne's World, Coneheads would not have gotten a movie. Unfortunately, Coneheads ended up being a flop. Now, many, many years before this was ever going to be a film, Rankin and Bass was talking about doing an animated series of the Coneheads. This was going to have the three main actors from the sketches doing the voices of the characters, but it only made it as far as a pilot. This movie was filmed in New Jersey and California. So when it comes to the film Coneheads, I actually do enjoy this one, and I think it is pretty funny. Now, with what they had to work with storyline wise from the sketches and everything, I think this was a pretty well developed story. So, at least for me on my scale, I'm giving Coneheads a 4 out of 5. Now, if you did enjoy the movie, other films I recommend checking out are Meet the Applegates, Spaced Invaders, Earth Girls Are Easy, and Mom and Dad Save the World. Now it's time to answer the trivia question from the beginning of this episode. What does Beldar mistake for chewing gum? So somehow he thinks that condoms are chewing gum. The funniest thing in this movie, though, is definitely when he, and even giving one to his leader, are blowing bubbles with these things. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Askewed Reviews. Keep an eye out over the next few months, as like I said, I'm going to try to go through all of the SNL movies and do trivia reviews for all of them.